cool. And I still don't know how in the heck to do.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm Adam, by the way. Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you.
And this is a podcast about you and your journey in music. And I want to talk to you about the new song. And you put out an EP like earlier this year, not that long ago, right?
Not that long ago at all, yeah. With more on the way soon, which we'll get into.
Killer. Awesome. I can't wait to hear about it.
Thanks.
So born and raised in Toronto, Canada? Is that what I read?
Yeah.
That you're okay, born and raised there.
Yeah, born and raised in Toronto. I actually coincidentally currently live right by where I went to high school.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
So have you left, or you were there and then moved away and came back?
So
or?
my parents kind of lived on like the north and south ends of the city. My mom wasn't too far south, but she was on the more south end towards downtown. My dad was in the more like uptown North York area before you're getting into like the outskirts of Toronto. So I never actually lived this close to school. And it's funny because as a kid, I'm sure I would have died to live this close to my high school because everyone did and I didn't. But no, I like moved out of my parents, moved in the city. And then it just so happened that when my roommate and I were looking for this place, which is literally like, if I walked outside, I would see the school like 2 seconds away from my high school. I thought I'd hate it, but I actually don't. It's not been bad at all.
That's great. Do you see kids from your high school like wandering about that still live around?
I see kids that obviously go to the high school now, but not really kids that I went to high school with, coincidentally.
Okay, that's good. Is that a good thing? For me, it would be, but I don't know.
Like I don't mind not running into everyone from high school. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah.
Well, okay. I'm curious. We'll get to it because you said that you didn't live near the high school when you're going to the high school. But before we get to that part, so born and raised in Toronto area, what was it like growing up? And like, how did you get into music? Do you come from a musical household?
No. Also, wait, quickly. Is the thing I have on in the background distracting? I have like white noise. Can you even hear it?
I can't even hear it.
Okay. I didn't come from a musical household per se. Like neither of my parents were very much into music in terms of like, I don't think either of my parents play instruments and they don't necessarily sing. I came from both households that loved music though. Like I grew up listening to every different kind of music. My dad listened to a lot of like older R&B and country. So I love country. And then my mom listened to more like, I'm trying to think of the right genre name, like not techno, it wasn't techno, but like those like early like club beat kind of jams that used to be on the radio, and like Maroon 5 and like all the
pop and then the club electronic.
So I grew up kind of listening to everything, and because of that, to this day I still kind of love all kinds of music. But yeah, it was cool growing up and getting the both. I think that's why I'm so musically diverse, honestly, because I went back and forth between households and like literally different kinds of music as well.
Okay. And what about playing an instrument or singing? Was that something you did early on?
I tried to play the guitar, I think, when I was little, and I didn't stick with it. My dad put me in piano lessons and I also didn't stick with that. I wish I did, because I wish to God I could play an instrument now. And not that it's too late to learn. I really need to commit to learning though. I feel like it would be a little easier to learn the piano first, not even necessarily because it's easier, but also because I constantly have these claws on. So guitar might be a little difficult.
Oh yeah. But even piano might be hard.
Piano I can work with. Piano
Okay.
But I definitely would love to learn an instrument. I didn't grow up playing one. I grew up just singing and actually teaching myself how to sing. Even from a really young age, I was very hypercritical of myself, which can be a good thing and a bad thing. In this case, more of a good thing because I taught myself how to sing. And when I heard something that wasn't right, I would teach myself the right way to do it, or I'd do it over and over again until I found it. So if I was singing even as a kid, and I recognized that I got a note wrong or a word wrong, even if I was singing alone, I'd like go back and like do it until I did it properly. kind of
Oh,
thing.
interesting. Okay.
So I
But that's good that
really,
you could hear it. I mean, to know that you sang it wrong, right? I
well,
mean, some people just tone deaf, like
I didn't
they
know
think they
that.
sound great.
I didn't know that that wasn't a thing. I
Oh,
did.
interesting.
I genuinely didn't know, because obviously until someone tells you, like, you're going to go based off what you hear. I thought
Mhm.
that everyone could hear, but maybe they just couldn't like sing it that way. Like hand-eye coordination, you can see a ball coming at you, but it doesn't mean you can catch it. I thought that
Sure.
maybe people could hear it, but they couldn't like get to the part where they were able to like replicate it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
no, no, no. But yeah, but obviously that's not the case with a lot of
some people
people.
just can't hear it either. But because of that, I got very um like drill sergeant with myself about timing, about pitch, about the way something was saying, the vibrato, if it had it, if it didn't, trying to teach myself that. So I was kind of my own vocal teacher for quite some time, but as lucky as I was to be blessed with a lot of that, there's definitely always room for improvement. And I think in anyone's case, vocal lessons and learning formally is always a really great way. I can see my
Hi,
cat.
Kitty.
Guy. Yeah, I think vocal lessons and going to someone more experienced in yourself is always a great way to improve upon what you already have.
And was that later in life that you did that?
Yeah, very much
Okay.
later. So I kind of sung, on my own to myself. I post YouTube covers and stuff like that here and there in high school. But it wasn't until I started really releasing music, like 2.5 years ago,
Hmm.
that I started. It wasn't until I got the chance to live perform, really, because it's a whole different skill set, and you can be a phenomenal vocalist. You can record really well. You can sing even a cappella really well. But the second you get a mic,
Hmm.
I don't know, there's something different about that. And even everything right down to, you can be a phenomenal singer, but if you don't have stage presence, that's a decent amount of the battle when you get up on a stage.
Oh
So
yeah, for
I
sure. I
started,
feel like even with those singing competitions, like if American Idol or whatever,
oh yeah,
like the person that could sing, I mean, the best, like that has this insane voice, insane range. If they don't come out and like rock the crowd, then
you need
they have
the
no chance.
charisma,
Yeah.
especially now. People want to see a show. Um,
Hmm.
so I actually learned, I had a trial by fire and I had a performance, my first ever performance. It was still during COVID, so it wasn't like full on.
Hmm.
Um, but I was cocky and I thought I could just get up there. And
Hmm.
I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. I learned the hard way. I guess now I'm kind of glad I did, because now I'm like, never, never again.
Hmm.
And the second that show was over, I was like, I need a vocal coach. I need a stage coach. I need something, because that was awful. And I'm never, granted, there was a mistake that was made also that day. That wasn't me, but I definitely did not come prepared. Um, Two people played my track at the same time, but like just off.
Oh,
Yeah. So I
that would
like,
mess up anyone.
so it messed me up, yeah, but it mainly messed up my confidence, because even when it stopped at that point, I already felt defeated, which was bad. You have to learn. Even a vocal coach and a stage coach can help you with that, like, learning to keep your composure and stuff like that. I was just so fresh and I didn't
Hmm.
know. And but yeah, trial by fire, learn the hard way, never again. And ever since, I started going to a vocal coach who also helps me with stage presence. She is amazing, and I have improved like astronomically since I started doing that.
Well, that's great. Where was that show at? Was it like a live stream thing or was it before COVID or?
No, no, it was during COVID. It was like a drive-in
Okay.
show kind of thing. So it wasn't like a bunch of people sitting, like standing up there. Like it wasn't like a full-on show, but it was still a show.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
The car things were weird. Like I never went to one. I did see a few, like footage of a few, and I was like, okay, like
That
I
was the only one I went to. I
okay.
understand it. I'm thankful that they gave me that opportunity, even
Oh, for
though I
sure.
feel like I squandered it. Like I feel like I could have been more prepared. But um I probably wouldn't have gone, like I probably wouldn't have been like jumping to go to like a drive-in show for an artist, I imagine.
Mhm. Right. Well, it's one of those things like that'll probably never happen again, right? I mean, hopefully not. Where
No, I
like
don't think
artists is like,
so.
all right, I'm gonna tour and I'm gonna play at a drive-in, and you could sit in your car. Like, so you're kind of a part of something that's like a historical piece of something
Yeah,
that will never happen ever again.
that's true. The worst
That's
show
kind of
of
cool.
my life.
But you won't remember it. Nobody will remember it that way. They'll be like, "Oh, Ari Hicks, I saw her at this like drive-in. It was crazy."
Drive-in theater. Drive-in show. But yeah, that was my first, and it went the way it went. And well, I'm
Is
here.
what it is.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, to rewind a little bit here. So did you do theater, musical theater, or anything like that? Or were you in like a choir or chorus going through school?
So yes and no.
Okay.
In grade 9, this was sneaky. There was a music teacher who was a bit of a tyrant. Um, Great musically, but he was like known around the school for being a bit of a tyrant. And one of the things he started doing and you didn't know obviously until you got there, is if you signed up for music as a course, like in your daily schedule, you were required to join choir,
Oh,
like extracurricular.
okay.
Like you had to.
You had to be in the choir. And
Had
it
to.
wasn't even like another class. It was like you had to show up and stay after school to
Extracurricular,
do
like,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Oh
Okay.
yeah. So you get there and he's like, by the way, you're all in choir. I was like, oh, okay. I was an alto 2, which means I was the lowest you could possibly go vocal range wise. So I have a range that typically does sit lower actually. And I'm thankful for it now. Like it's fun to look back on. At the time it was not. But I did learn a decent amount. It was also cool to be able to work. I don't think I appreciated it at the time, especially now doing vocal lessons and like the similarities between. He was a great vocal teacher, so to speak, but again, he was a complicated man. But I didn't do musical theater. Like I said, I do like I don't think I said this yet. I do like talent shows
Okay.
and stuff like that. In terms
Like
of the acting
covers. So like, would you go up and do covers at talent
yeah,
shows?
I was actually never a writer. Like writing music didn't come naturally to me. It was something I had to learn after I left high school, actually. I wish I did get more into it when I was younger, but it's not something that came naturally. I had to really teach myself, which I always find interesting because when it comes to artists, you don't really hear about that side of it often. So I'd love to talk about that later on, but
Oh
yeah.
yeah, I loved it. Yeah, that's why I love this podcast, because it's just finding out these little pieces of how you got to where you are. Yeah, right.
Yeah. But theater wise, funny enough, I was always told I should go into theater, like acting. That's what my mom always wanted me to do. She loved me singing and she always wanted me to be a singer, but she always, for some reason, was like, you need to be TV shows and like movies, you need to act. And I wasn't half bad when it came to drama class, but that's about the most training
Acting.
I had
Okay.
in that arena, in that area.
Gotcha. Well, you said you signed up for a music class, but you had to be in the chorus. But was that something like, what did you sign up for? Was it just like a general music
I just
chorus?
thought, like, why not? I've always loved singing. Like, let's see what this is. You have to fill up your course schedule. I didn't want it all to be like academic, because
so you were singing in the music class, but then you are also added to this choir, extracurricular choir.
Yeah, it was like vocal training as well as more like music theory.
Okay.
More than anything, like reading music, which is hard to learn. I'm not gonna lie. I don't think I remember any of it. But there's like worksheets and music theory, and like I'm trying to remember what we did in class. Like it wasn't necessarily easy. It wasn't hard, but it wasn't easy. And like he'd give you like music theory homework, and I'd be like, what am I looking at? But choirs where we did the most like singing, because you had to learn and perform obviously like full pieces of music. It was definitely really cool. The best part about choir is everyone singing together, because our choir wasn't half bad. Like it was a decent choir. But like hearing the way that certain things, like I said, I don't think I appreciated it at the time because I was forced to join it. And oh my God, anything that I am forced to do, I will hate. I will hate. There's one thing I've learned about myself, especially as a child, like my mom forced me into like a handful of sports. I hate them to this day. I will not. But I think I didn't appreciate it, obviously, because it was like a requirement. And I was like, well, now I don't want to do it.
Yeah. You didn't sign up to be there.
But hearing the way that people like mesh together and like harmonies, I think that was the first time I was really introduced to harmonies. I think I never actually realized this until right now. I think that's maybe what taught me how to hear harmonies, because not everyone can. It's one thing to be able to sing and hear and perform music and be on pitch and on time in this, but hearing harmonies is a whole different skill. And I don't think I ever really keyed into where I learned it from, because I don't think that came naturally to me either. I think it might have been from choir. So thank you, choir.
There you go. That's
Yeah.
awesome. You mentioned doing YouTube covers in high school, right? You'd go like sing, do a cappella or sing to a track or something on YouTube and shoot yourself or film yourself.
Yeah, there was like the first one I ever did. Actually, a friend of mine was at my place, and they were like, they were always trying to get me to sing. It's really great to reflect on the people that have really been like in my corner for a long time, or even if they're not people I keep in touch with super much anymore, people that have always been like, you're gonna do this, like this is what you're meant to do. This was one of those people, and he was at my place. And he was like, oh, sing that song. I think I'd sang it before. It's a song called We Don't Have to Take Our Clothes Off. Beautiful rendition of it by a girl named, I'm going to butcher her name. I don't know if it's Emily or Emily Sonde. I'd probably butcher that. She's great. And I just found like, it was so janky. I literally just found a YouTube like a cappella to it, or like instrumental to it, played it off my computer and sang to it out loud, and they recorded it on their camera. So like it wasn't
cool.
Like,
yeah.
Anyway.
Sure. Those are the best ones though. Like totally like earlier DIY YouTube video.
And that one actually did pretty well, funny enough. But I did that, and then there's a guy in the city. His name's Jordan Hart. He was the first person to ever get me to write music. Now, granted, we wrote a song together, and he wrote like 5% of it. But he was the first person to like pull me out of my comfort zone to write. I think at the time, especially in high school, and I still have that tendency now. I was an athlete growing up. I was very good at a lot of the things I tried. And because of that, I think I developed a thing where I didn't want to try anything I didn't think I'd be good at, which is very limiting. And it's a very easy headspace to get in your own way, which I did a lot. But he was the first person to kind of pull me out of that musically. And I think that's why I didn't try writing, is I just didn't really know how, and I didn't think I'd be good at it. So he really made me try. We wrote a song together that's a beautiful song. I actually still love it. And sometimes to this day, I still get people asking about it, like a handful of people that have been watching me since like early on. And it's on YouTube, and it did so well. And we recorded it together, very like bare bones. And he's a phenomenal singer, like phenomenal. He still is. He still sings. He's great. And then I ended up doing a couple more covers with him and his girlfriend, because she also does music. So they're really cute. They like do it together. And they were really fun. And they were the first people to really introduce me to like really trying covers and stuff like that.
Okay. And they also, it sounds like he was the first person to help you write a song too. Like, because you said that comes later, right? Like you didn't start really writing so that was in high school when you wrote that or worked with that first song, and then did those cover songs as well.
Yeah, that was like tail end of high school.
Gotcha. Well, real quick, just because I'm curious now, you said that you didn't really live close to this high school. Was it an arts high school, or like why, like
just
to travel? Yeah, just happened to fall that way.
I grew up, so I guess like I'm sure it's the same for everyone, but there's like almost like a school system. Like I had a school, like my primary school when they went to grade 6, and then middle school 7 and 8, and then high school. And I feel like people usually follow the same like 3 schools. Like there's like a path almost kind of.
It's like within the same like district or whatever.
Laid out. Yeah. So like there's a decent amount of primary schools, but then they usually all funnel into like 1 or 2 middle schools.
Yeah, middle high school.
And they funnel into like 1 of 3 high schools, let's say. So I grew up very close to my primary school, which is somewhat in this neighborhood. And because I made such an attachment to that kind of like route, I think from a young age, I was like really fixated and keen on like staying in that route. Like I didn't want to move schools. I didn't want to have to start.
Which makes sense. You don't want to find new kids and you're the new person. Like it's just a lot.
My parents moved in like the 4th grade or something like that. So it was still very much in my primary school. And that's my favorite school. That like in all the schooling I've ever done, best school. I loved that primary school. And I'd still talk to the teachers there, like to this day.
That's cool.
But I made such an attachment to that school specifically that I convinced them to let me stay somehow and like let me commute.
Mhm.
And then after that, it didn't make any sense to move me anywhere else. Like I was already commuting for the primary school. I might as well have just kept
Just continue on.
the same
Sure.
route. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. So talk to me about learning to write and how that all became like, what made you want to pursue this as like a career path? Like, was it from the success off YouTube, or like what was kind of the moment when you finished high school that you were like, I'm gonna do this?
Yeah. So I always knew I wanted to. I think it's like with anything that you dream to do, you want to, but you don't know if you can. Or you
Hmm.
have a moment where you have to like analyze as you get older, like, is this actually realistic? You know, like, can I
Sure.
put all my eggs into this basket? Like, what's the plan here? Um,
Hmm.
and I don't think I genuinely thought I could start pursuing music, but kind of what happened was I started gaining a bit of a following on Instagram back when like Instagram really started popping off and people and influencers really started becoming a big thing. And like everyone
Hmm.
was very into that. And it was very easy to grow. And it was such a cool time because now it's impossible to grow.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but
It's crazy.
I I hopped on that like a little at like a decent time. And so I started growing because of like modelly photos I was posting, or like, I don't know, like Brandy Melville or something like reposted one of my photos. And that was back when they were like really big. So I started gaining a following from like random things like that.
Hmm.
And I think I started thinking because I at the time like had no following at all. Um, and didn't think it was possible for me to have one like truly. So once it started happening, I was like, oh, this is new and really cool. Like, I wonder what I can do with this. And I think the more I started growing, the more I realized I was like, maybe if I have enough people that are interested in me and that follow me, I can get them to listen to my music, I think was kind of the thought process
Sure.
I went through there. Um, and so I kept on like trying to like post and gain a following. And then I recorded that first video I told you about and I posted it and people were very intrigued. So I was like, huh, like maybe I can actually do this. And the person that recorded that video that I told you was sitting with me, like he um was really popular on Instagram, still is, but he was really popular for like a certain kind of photo he'd take. It was like he was very like niche for it. And he was huge in the city. And I remember when he reached out to shoot, I was like, oh my God. And we became good friends and shot together very much. And a lot of the photos that we took would get reposted in places. And that's how I really started growing. Um, and he was one of the first people too to be like, you should really post more singing videos. He was like, I'll even take them for you if you want. Like, let's, you know, he was the first to kind of push me
Hmm.
in that direction. And he was the one, if I'm not mistaken, that actually introduced me to the guy that I wrote my first song with.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I started growing like that, and it was kind of mix of a couple like things like that. Um, and then I posted the singing videos. People kind of took interest. I kind of like, I think, didn't know how to really get my foot in the door for music. It's one thing
Mhm.
to post covers and have them do well, but it's like, how do you start creating your own? I can't produce. I don't play any instruments. I'm not a typical born, like I'm not a natural born writer. So I was like, how in the heck do
Right.
I
How do I do
embark
this?
on this journey? And I feel like the music industry is so interesting because it can be really hard. I found it in this city, especially. It can be really hard to get your foot in the door, like to really truly like meet people and have that open up. And I didn't have a lot of money. So you have to find people that are also willing to work with you, like on good faith, which is a whole other thing in and of itself. And I've been so lucky with that. But after high school, because of how much I had grown on social media, I was like, honestly, F it. I knew I didn't want to go to university. I applied to a bunch of universities. I got in. I even deferred one a year, like just to, you know, like prove to my parents, you know, like I'm choosing this. It's not because I couldn't do something else. Like this is what I want to do. And I just went to LA. I just like Yeah,
Wow.
because of like some social media connections or like one or two people that I knew, like I was able to really like just go there and try. I like had my first kind of management situation. There were two girls from New York who were great, just didn't end up being the right fit, which happens.
Mhm.
And they put me in a lot of sessions, so they were kind of my foot into that door. And they put me in a lot of sessions. They call it like speed dating almost, where you're like
Right.
a news producer and writer like every day. And from that, I learned, I started learning eventually how to kind of write and get a feel from people more experienced than me of what I did and didn't like. And then you have to find your genre and what do you want to say and how do you want to brand yourself. And, but that's kind of how I started. I kind of just jumped right into it.
Okay. And then were you living in LA or you would just take trips there?
I stayed there for quite a
Okay.
while.
Stayed there. Got you.
I stayed there for quite a while, and did the like, speed dating thing with producers and writers and learned how to write. And then I came home. I kind of had a stall for like a year and a bit. Like I came home, I was still doing the social media thing, and I started learning the hard way that just because people follow you, it doesn't mean you can direct them to anything. Um,
Right. I've heard
and
that that's a very hard
and
thing to
when
do.
people were following me, they were following me because they maybe liked how I looked, or when I would travel, like they liked seeing me travel in this. Like they started liking me as an influencer, so to speak.
Hmm.
And I wanted to be a musician, and I think I got lost for a while in the circle of that and like how to
Hmm.
break it. Because I was like, okay, cool, like I'm still growing and I'm getting good engagement, but it's not for what I want to be. I started kind of losing track of
Right.
getting to where I wanted to be. Um,
Was that discouraging? I mean, to be posting the modeling is, modeling type photos and then the traveling pictures
oh yeah.
that are doing well. And then you're like, okay, and here's my singing video of a song that I wrote. And then
Well,
it's
the
not
singing
doing.
videos, I kind of cheated. The singing videos would do well, but like I'd take them on these trips. So like I'd be in like a water cave and I'd like do a singing video and that would go crazy. But at the end of the day, people are saying, oh, you're talented, this is this. It doesn't mean they're going to want to listen to your music.
Gotcha.
So I hadn't released anything at that point because I still hadn't felt like I found the right thing. And there were a couple producers in LA that I met, mainly like two, a duo in particular that I became very close with that were amazing and I recorded amazing songs with. But I felt like I was missing the piece to the releasing because like even if you have the songs, you still need everything else.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I met my manager, who I'm with now, that last piece really clicked, and that was about 2.5 years ago. I was so lost before then. I was like, I had these songs and I was like trying to find, I wasn't with those managers anymore that I kind of started with, and
Hmm.
I didn't know how to release. You need an album cover, and what's your branding, what's your message, what are you trying to say, how are you going to release it, like how are you going to get it to Spotify and all this stuff. And I didn't know what I was doing. And yeah, then I met Nicole, who's my manager now, and she took a really big interest in me and like the potential, um, and we ended up being in LA at the same time. She's from Toronto as well. um, that was like September of 2019.
Oh,
um,
wow. Okay.
and I was going to LA in October. She also coincidentally was heading to LA in October as well. And she ended up through a friend of hers getting me a session with a producer that I ended up writing my first like bunch of songs with. And one of the first songs we wrote together with a co-write that I've worked with so many times. She's so freaking amazing. Her name's Rachel. She really opened up my horizons for writing. Like I learned a lot from her, and just watching her go, because she's like a machine. Like the way she comes up with things, I'm like, I don't think I'll ever be on that level. But she's so talented and so open to me and great. And so was this producer. His name's Cambo. And I don't know if I said her name was Rachel West. And we did the first song. Our first song all collectively was called Nothing But a Monster. And that was the first song I ever released. And from then on, it was just like, go, go, go. Like almost every song that I was doing and that I was recording like felt right.
Hmm.
Um, and it kind of just kept going from there. And here I am today.
And you're kind of building and then you built kind of built your sound off of that.
Yeah,
Just kind of
so
adapted.
I think the interesting thing about being an artist in your sound, and this is that depending on when you start and how you are at that time, especially when you're so young, like people that are starting at 16 or 18 or 20
Mhm.
even, your sound's going to potentially want to change when you do. And
Right,
you've
of
still got
course.
so much growing to do that that's a very real possibility. And in my case, that was 100% the case.
Mhm.
So I kind of started like the songs I was doing before I met my manager, they were a lot more like pop and like cool and chill. They were like chill, but like definitely more poppy. And that 100% felt like what I was at the time. And there's still a handful of them that I'd almost still maybe release today and maybe revisit. But I kind of felt a bit of a change in myself. And when I got to the producer and the writer that I worked with, you know, at the real beginning of my project, because that's when I actually started releasing music, I ended up in this like kind of R&B tinged pop lane. And I
Mhm.
definitely liked it. And I thought, why not just go with it? Because it's the first thing that felt like it had that kind of like I was looking for. Um, and so I released that, started doing more. The second song I did was also a little more like R&B, kind of cool. And then I started gravitating towards more of like a pop rock
Mhm.
realm, which I wouldn't do again. Not because I don't like pop rock, but it very quickly didn't feel like me. I think I realized, especially when I started performing, when you get up on stage, what are you going to be excited to sing?
Mhm.
And I think I felt like those songs, although they were true to me when I wrote them and released them, I was moving away from because I was growing as a person and as an artist. And then I really settled on kind of like a more darker pop sound with what I'm doing now, which I personally really love and think that's kind of where I want to stay.
Yeah, yeah, and I was gonna say now your sound is definitely that dark. It's
Mhm.
pop, but it's kind of got even, but it has that kind of like R&B elements to it as well, I feel like.
Definitely, yeah. Like I really, really love figuring out not just R&B sound, but I love R&B melodies.
Mhm.
I think they're beautiful, A, and B, you can take the most like liberties with
Mhm.
them. Like you can really sing them differently if you want. And I find with pop melodies, you can kind of get locked into like singing them a very certain way.
Mhm.
And I still have a decent amount of pop melodies in what I do, but the R&B melodies I think have to be my favorite for myself personally.
Very cool. I'm just curious, this is kind of off topic, but you mentioned having this Instagram following kind of growing and growing and growing while you were still in high school. Is that what you said?
Mm.
Was that something that people were envious of or jealous of? Because I know that that's such a like a. I mean, I have a 14-year-old son that's like that's all he cares about is like cloud and like followers and all that. Like it's just like that generation. So I was wondering if that was something that people were kind of envious of.
It was still like the start of that. Like my age
Okay.
group, it was really the start of that generation because iPhones and social media, like when was Instagram first made? Was
I
like
think 2010, I think
okay,
around there.
like that's when I was like 10 or 11. So it was like really when kids who are that age now, like they're on social media that early, but like we grew with it.
Uh-huh. Sure, sure.
So
I think
it was
that's right.
still
Now I'm
kind
gonna
of
look.
new. And there was a girl in my school who I was actually friends with. She was so sweet. She was insanely smart too. She was great. She was hilarious. But she had quite a big following. She was like, I remember like people used to be like, oh, that's her. Like she's got like so many followers just because it was like so weird at the time because it was so new. Like it was
Hmm.
such a new concept. Like YouTubers and Instagrammers, like that wasn't really a thing. Like it just started being a thing. Like it was like Viners at the time
Yeah.
instead of TikTokers. And it like just started being a thing. And I think it was still very new. And I remember people were like kind of weird about her. And I didn't understand why. I think that was the first where people started realizing like a new kind of intimidation. It was like
Right.
a new kind of celebrity almost without being a celebrity. So people didn't really know how to like deal with it, I think. They just got really weirdly intimidated by this girl, I know for sure. She was an absolute sweetheart. And I never got as big as her. Like she had a huge following in high school. And she ended up actually like, she's not even on Instagram anymore. She deleted it. She hated it. She didn't even care for it.
Wow.
Yeah. She was so smart too. And no one even like, I don't think even really knew like how smart this girl was. And she just pursued something like that she wanted to do. I don't even remember what it was, but when I started growing, it was like a weird of like being teased about it and not.
Mhm.
I think people were kind of just like it was still considered like maybe cool, but still uncool. Like it was still one of those things where it's like, like you have an Instagram following, like, oh, you must think you're cool, or like something like that kind of energy.
Right.
So I'd kind of be teased about it a little bit, but then at the same time, I think when people start like really, or like when I hit certain milestones of things, I think people were like, oh, like it's a real actual thing. Like I won this contest in high school for this UK magazine. It's called Love Magazine. And the contest was that you'd get to be photographed by Kendall Jenner,
Oh, wow.
the issue and the cover. And like hundreds of thousands of people applied or something like that. And they picked 20 people from all over the world and flew us out to shoot. And I remember when I won, I couldn't tell anyone. And this didn't necessarily have to do with the following, because some of the people they picked were famous. Like there was like Kaya Gerber, if you know who she is, Cindy Crawford's daughter.
Okay.
She won it as well. Like she was a part of it. But then there were people from like, there was this one girl from Iceland who was so cool, and she maybe had like 10 followers or something like that. I think
Wow.
people, yeah, like it wasn't about that. Sure, they picked some people that had a bit of a following, but they also picked a decent amount of people that didn't. And I think some people wanted to be like, well, you only picked people that had a following kind of thing.
Right.
But I applied. It was like through social media. They reached out. I sent them like a video of me singing and like talked about like what I was, like who I was, what I was about. And I won, and I couldn't tell anyone. And I remember one or two guys like teasing me about it, like when I was walking down the hallway, like not like bad, but just being like making a comment, being like, oh, like the contest, like being kind of like,
Oh, like good luck. Like you,
about it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, like being like facetious and like kind of pricks about it.
sure.
And I don't know if at the time I did win, but I was like, just wait until and I went out, shot for it. I ended up getting one of the covers, which was really, really cool. It actually came out like on my birthday.
Wow.
And I remember coming back and people being like, oh, like you, oh, okay. Like what?
Like you won.
Like, and it was like little things like that. So I was like kind of a little teased about it, but it wasn't until after high school that people started like, I went to LA, and then people were like, oh my God, I saw you were in LA, like with this person, like kind of your typical, like what you'd expect.
Yeah.
People that didn't really pay me much mind in high school kind of became intrigued by the fact that I was like still very much pursuing this, because a lot of people, maybe now they do, but at the time, especially because social media still was not necessarily a viable way to make a living.
Right.
And it's still, up and down, but people, I think, were surprised to see that like I hadn't in fact gone to university, and that I was actually actively trying to pursue something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just so fascinating. I interviewed, I forgot who it was, Erica Tam. I don't. She was like on a Disney show, but she lived in. I think she lived where she lived, China. She was going back and forth, but anyway, she like had this huge Instagram following, and this guy asked her to prom, and he's like, but I'll only go with you if we take a picture together and you post it on your feed and then tag me or something. And she's like, what? Like, what do you think? Some sort of like prize? It was like, there's all these, yeah. Like, so she was getting all this stuff, and I always found that like so interesting. So I'm wondering, like, just because that was a life that I didn't ever see, when I was in high school, that wasn't anything that was around. So it's just so interesting to me.
It's definitely very easy that people start treating you transactionally.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be in your stories, especially like I said, like at the time it was still so booming, like it was so easy to grow, and if the right person noticed you, then this is this. So
Right.
everyone was so like excited by it. I think that people started being like, well, they wanted to be, I don't know if I ever got a lot of that. 'Cause like I said, like I grew, but I wasn't like that big. I experienced like a little bit of it when I was in LA. There was definitely like a repertoire of like an unspoken, sometimes not unspoken, but like an unspoken of like, what do you do and how many followers do you have?
I've heard that before as well.
Yeah.
A guy from a big band mentioned that. He's like, yeah, this person asked me how many, like basically how many followers do I have?
Such a huge thing. And I went to LA like right at the time that all of that was like still very much a thing. I wouldn't say like it is a thing now, but it's
Sure it
different. Like
is.
it's now the age of TikTok and like I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. But at the time, um, there definitely was like a bit of an unspoken, like people would look you up like right then and there. Like if you told them your name or like if they had seen you before, like if you'd seen the right person or this, and it was also whirlwind and you're meeting famous
So
people
crazy.
and YouTubers. And yeah, it was definitely crazy. Definitely crazy time.
Sure. Well, so you put out your first EP, Idiot Girl. Was that in the beginning of 2020 or when did that EP come out?
Like mid to end of 2020.
Okay. So you had been releasing songs for a bit of time before the full
Yeah,
EP came out.
I released like a handful of singles
Okay.
before I released the EP.
Okay. And at that point, were you doing TikTok? Because I mean, obviously, you said it's hard to get people to come over and then, listen to your songs and like trying to like get that whole back and forth to happen. I mean, was that something that you were doing also alongside your music?
It was a lot easier then. And
Mhm.
it didn't feel like as much of a job because it was before like people like being a TikTok kind of influencer was also really a thing. Um, there
I feel
were
like that's pretty new, right? Within the last two
there were
years.
still it was the pandemic that really like nuked it
Okay.
because it was still so easy to grow.
Mhm.
The algorithm wasn't as jam packed because I don't even think there were as many people on TikTok. Like the pandemic really set it off, like even with the
Yeah.
sheer amount of users. So that
Yeah.
means
It's like when moms are doing dance challenges, I'm like, okay, this app is definitely now going to be
that
the
even,
biggest thing ever.
yeah, like algorithmically, it even makes it more difficult to grow. I imagine this might be, BS, but because there's a whole bunch of other people you're now kind of competing against
Mhm.
for that slot, like on a For You page. Um,
Sure.
so I found that it was actually fun. Like I actually enjoyed it at the time because like I would just make a video when I felt like it.
Mhm.
And, like I naturally wanted to post about my song and like people would be receptive to it. And I'd post singing videos in the bathroom and this. And then one day it became such a requirement and it started getting so packed with people that it started feeling a little discouraging when videos weren't doing well, especially because I was used to it being a lot more receptive and easier to grow. And then videos started doing not as well right at the time where people started requiring that they do well. Like it became the only way to grow because the pandemic happened and I couldn't do shows. I couldn't get my name out there by touring with someone or doing a show on my own or anything like that. People were coming to terms with the fact that they had to be locked inside. And
Mhm.
TikTok, the people that, were able to figure it out, which wasn't necessarily me, really did well. And a lot of songs and a lot of artists had such amazing success from it. And I felt like the more artists that had success from it, I personally found, maybe this is kind of jaded to say, but I found that it felt harder for me to get there. Like
Mhm.
it felt harder to grow. And it started becoming honestly something that was daunting and felt like a chore because I felt like because it's algorithmic, it's not necessarily just up to you. You can make sure that you're doing all the right things, like make sure you're posting consistently and you can try doing trends that'll probably boost your chance, but it was discouraging because it felt like if a video didn't do well, it was my fault. And I still wrestle with that a lot because they're doing progressively worse and worse, at least when it comes to me. Um, but you kind of have to keep plugging away at it because there's not really much else for you to do. I guess the alternative is just not trying at all, which isn't necessarily the greatest thing to do.
Right. I mean, but I guess just looking at your Spotify streams, it doesn't really I mean, to get 2 million plus streams on a song, I mean, that's not something that TikTok could really do, unless it's like you'll see those songs where it's like one will pop off and then people will go from there over. But 90% of the time, that song will do well, and then the rest of the other ones on that person's page, you have no plays, right? It's like less than 1,000, and then you have one that has like 7 million plays. You're like, wait, what?
That's another thing that happened with TikTok as well, because at the beginning, if a song popped off, usually the artist popped off with it. But now, because there's so many songs popping off, they'll stick with you for the song, and they're less likely, at least, to stick with the artist unless they form an attachment to the artist. I think someone that did a really good job, where she was already popping off, but she really capitalized on TikTok, is a girl named Queen Herbie. If you've heard of her.
I have not. I feel
She's
so
got
old.
bomb songs. She's bomb, but she's just so cool because I think people formed an attachment to her as a person, which means they were more inclined to form an attachment to her as an artist because of what she represented. Like, she was just cool. She like had these cool songs, and like the way she carried herself and the way she carried them, like everything just fit. And I think she's one of the few people I've seen where people really attach to her as an artist, like a lot. Another girl that was really good at that, is a girl named Tessa Violet, I believe is her name.
Oh yeah, I've had her on my show before.
Oh yeah, she
Yeah.
capitalized off TikTok as heck. She was, I don't even know how she came up with that many creative things. Like, she was the queen of that. Like, her transitions that she'd come up with for her own song were so cool that people ended up like, she really made her own songs pop off. And a lot of these people where their songs popped off, a lot of the time it was like accident, or like someone else would make a trend to it. Like, she's one of the only people I've seen where she really like pioneered her own music popping off, which I think is so cool. And I still don't know how in the heck to do myself.
She also, but she did have a huge. She started off on YouTube. When I interviewed her, it hadn't even COVID hadn't happened yet, so TikTok wasn't even like a thing yet, and she still had that like
So
massive following. Yeah,
I mean, as we've seen, like, just because you're big on one platform doesn't mean you'll be big on it. So
sure.
she still had to put in that work on TikTok, but
oh yeah, she capitalized on both of them, but she did have that.
If she was a YouTube personality, that means it was already built into her person, which is
right.
really
Exactly.
cool.
Exactly.
She was, yeah, probably a little more equipped than the rest of us, which is so cool because she really made it work.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's really awesome. Well, you've been able to do that with your songs. I mean, your EP didn't come out that long ago, and you know they have hundreds of thousands of streams.
I've been very, very lucky. I've also, you know, being independent is also super challenging, and all throughout the pandemic, you know, it's like everything costs so much. Music is expensive. Music is expensive. And especially like my manager and I, like, we started doing things at a really high caliber for the money that we have. And I think when we started doing it like that, we were like, well, we can't stop now. Like the rabbits we've been able to pull out of the hats, I don't even understand how we make it work every time. But luckily we do, because we have, like I said, I've been really fortunate from day one to find people that have been willing to work with me on the music end. It's been the exact same thing on the team end. Like, I have a makeup and hair artist that literally, like, they believe in me and my projects, so they're always willing to work with us, which is so lucky. Like, wow, is that so lucky? And people that have signed on for the videos and art that have also been willing to work with us, because that's such a huge thing. And like, they don't get much monetary value from that. Like, they're doing it because they have to like or believe in, you know, like what I'm doing, which, like I said, I keep saying I'm lucky, I'm a broken record, but I really am. And I've also been very lucky because I've received a lot of really great playlisting, like from the DSPs, like from Spotify and Apple Music. And again, I've been lucky enough to have people from those platforms that have also really believed in me and the projects that I've put out and the vision that I have for my music and my projects and the branding. And I think all the work and blood, sweat, and tears we put into the music videos and the like imagery also surrounding this music has also really made people feel where we're going with everything, that extra mile to really believe in what we're doing, because they see how much that we put into everything. Like, my manager and I, we do everything, come up with the concepts, put together the teams, she produces, sometimes I write, sometimes I even edit some of the things that like go out just to make it work, because you got to do what you got to do to make it work. but yeah, the support system that I've had, I mean, I really am, I hate that I've said this so many times, luckier than most, because there's even full blown artists with label deals that aren't that, it doesn't automatically mean you're going to get that playlisting and get that visibility.
No.
And that's one area where I have lucked out probably more than a lot of people have.
Yeah. And you are also independent, so you can release as you feel. Like you don't owe anyone anything, right? I mean, there's a lot of artists that are just itching to put something out and the label's like, not yet. We're not ready.
And it really can be that brutal. And there's, full blown artists, like even running back to TikTok, there's full blown artists, like huge artists and stars that are like, yeah, I was told, my label told me I couldn't release this unless I started promoting it on TikTok, or like unless it got a certain amount of traction on social media. And it
Mhm.
didn't have to be like that. And I've heard, obviously I don't want to come off insensitive. And I know that there's a line that you can cross as an artist where you do become, just as a person in that position, where you can become very easily tone deaf if you complain about certain things that a lot of people would kill for. Um,
Uh-huh.
but I do think it's important for people to recognize that, like, this is an artist's livelihood. It's their art. It's everything they put their heart and soul into. And maybe eventually you can be like, okay, but like, you need to do what you need to do, maybe. But also putting your heart and soul into something and then having someone tell you that you can't release it because of a social media app, or because they don't think it's right. Like, this is your project, this is your image, like you are the artist, and someone's telling you that you can't be you. That's
Mhm.
tough. That's very tough. And I've seen a lot of people be like, well, you signed up for this, like you signed yourself away to a label. It's like, yes, but there's give and take. Being an independent artist is great for freedom, but music is expensive. You don't automatically, you have to make those connections. You have to build everything from the ground up. And even if you do have a label, you still have to put in so much work. And it
Mhm.
means you may have that support, but then on the flip end, you have people telling you literally what you can and cannot do. So
Yeah.
it's a give and a take. No one's situation is going to be perfect, and everyone puts in hard work. I just don't think it's fair, especially for people that don't do music, because I didn't know until I started doing it. And I'm a hypocrite in that area as well, because I would look from the outside in and kind of say, well, you're lucky, or this. Then when you get into it, you don't realize how much work has to go into it. Like you have to put on so many hats, especially as an independent artist. You've got to be creative. You've got to be your own creative director sometimes. You have to like write your music videos and album artwork, unless you're drawing it, which you 100% can. But if you're not artistically inclined and you don't know someone that is, you want to shoot it. You can go old school and you can shoot it on an iPhone, sure. But if you want to do something more, it's going to cost you.
Right.
You need makeup, you need studio, you need lighting, you need this. And it doesn't have to be that high production, but eventually, like, you're going to get there. And there's a lot of different things that go into it that I don't think people realize. So when you put all that work in, just to have someone at the end of the road tell you that all that work you might have done could be for nothing,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
it's very hard. And obviously there's only so much you can go down that hole before you have to be like, I have a choice. Either I can stay pissed off, or I can do my best to try and figure out a way around this, try and be creative, like let's figure out the way, or try and find a compromise. And sometimes they just say no, F you, and you're not allowed. But I do think there's a balance between the two for sure.
Yeah. I think didn't Halsey do that? She like came out and
Yeah,
like
and
she
I
wasn't
saw
allowed to
a
put a
lot of
song out.
people I saw a lot of people shit on her, being like, well, you signed up for this. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, but sure. I mean, it's like any job. You sign up to go to work, but it doesn't mean that it's tough. Or that, sorry, it doesn't mean
Not
that it's
tough.
not tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
You don't
Exactly.
have to go to your job every day, but if your boss is being a dick, or if you're overtired or overworked, like, you 100% have the right to feel burnt out and feel frustrated. I guess
Sure.
sometimes I get into an area where I'm like, I know she's an artist and I know she signed up for this, but she's also a person. And
Hmm.
I think that she also deserves the right to be frustrated when she puts all her work into something and has someone stand in her way. Now, like I said, there's,
Right. No, for sure. But
but
she's to the point, I mean, where she's not an artist that needs to rely on them anymore. You know what I mean?
it's
It's like,
surprising that I think it was also kind of, people realize it's like even artists as big as her still have to go through that, all this stuff
yeah.
that you might think is a myth, or
Yeah,
you hear
they're all
bad
contractually
labels.
obligated to do these things. And like, yeah, it's all has to
Sure.
fall in line with the Yeah, the vision of the bigger, the money,
Are.
right?
They really are, because a lot of the times label deals, you end up owning less than half of yourself
Hmm.
by the end.
Right.
So
Yeah. Or
really
you're Taylor Swift and don't own any of your masters and you have to
exactly.
re-record all your records.
No, like, the poor girl had to re-record all of her own songs that she built her career off of, that she put, and she wrote all of those too, if I'm not mistaken, like herself.
Yeah, she did.
And she had to re-record them being like the Taylor Swift she is today, because someone had to tell her no. That's so frustrating. Like, are you gonna look at that girl and be like, well, those songs got you to where you are, so you should be thankful? It's like, no, of course she's thankful, but that's her music.
It's her music. It was like when the Beatles, like Paul McCartney had to buy back his catalog. It's like, what?
Power move that she was just like, honestly, I'm gonna re-record everything.
Right, exactly. What are you gonna do about it?
Yeah,
I'm
what
just
are you
gonna
gonna
go
do?
yeah, I'm just gonna record it all.
That's one of the ways where she was like, I am done being, I'm not gonna cry about this. I mean, like, it's frustrating as hell, but she was like, I'm just gonna re-record everything. F you.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of
That's
those ways where you just have to be like, I would be if I was in her position. All those songs, the way that they're recorded, I'm so finicky with that. If I record something a certain way and I can't match it, like if I go to re-record it or something, I'll use the first take. So I get
oh right.
attached to the way that something is recorded, because there's a certain amount of emotion that you can feel in the way
Mhm.
you record, or a style that sometimes you might not be able to replicate just the same way.
Right.
She had to let all of those go and re-record them. Like, I would be livid.
I know, right? You get a take, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And then you're now it's what, 10 years later or whatever it is. She's trying to hit these notes or trying to sing it the same, like pretty close to what she did before. And it's like, this
Oh,
isn't gonna work.
I would
But
be.
like, yeah. Oh man. Well, I'm curious. Okay, so you have it's not that deep, chapter 1.
Mhm.
This chapter you and which is pretty I mean, you just released it, which is an incredible record. You have a chapter 2 coming out. Is that what Midas is part of?
Yes. So I decided to release 3 singles off of chapter 1, which was Sucker, Romeo Dies, and Shut Up and Look Pretty. And
Hmm.
then I released chapter 1. And then chapter 2 is the start of it is Midas. I'm releasing another single off chapter 2 that actually comes out in not too long of a time at all. Uh,
Okay.
and then the
Can we
body,
talk about it? We'll wait and we'll put the interview out after you put it out.
we can talk about it either way. It's okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, because I'm gonna have to start promoting for it very soon anyway, like very soon.
Okay.
So Midas did just come out. That was one of the first songs I recorded. So this album was really cool because it's supposed to be a full body of work, like a full
Okay.
album. We just decided to release it in 2 chapters, like strategically,
Well,
and
yeah, it's
also
smart, especially with the way people consume music these days. It's like,
we thought it was also cool, like story wise. It was cool to kind of divvy them up, because the feels of each chapter are definitely different.
mhm.
I'm not gonna lie, maybe pun intended. I'm kind of a sucker for chapter 2. That's like where that's like those are my babies. Like, I'm the most excited for those. I love all of it, but I think the 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 feel of chapter 2 is definitely a little darker, which is definitely what I'm vibing with these days.
Mhm.
Um, but this album was really cool because I had taken like almost a year break from releasing music, because I told you I did that pop rock sound, was starting to realize I wasn't really like meshing with it anymore. And then I did my Halloween themed EP, which I loved. I got to do
Yeah.
Cover Up I Put a Spell on You, which I love to this day. And Kiss Me, Kill Me, which is my most streamed song. And that was
Mhm.
one of the first songs I ever wrote that I did like entirely myself, start to finish. Like I
Wow.
said, I was working with a decent amount of co-writers when I was learning how to write.
Mhm.
Um, but, and
That
I
must have been validating to have the song that you wrote, all by yourself to be the most streamed one, even to this day.
definitely a pat on the back for sure. It's definitely kind of fun being able to say that to myself. But I really do love working with co-writes, not necessarily because there was one point in time where I really did need it, but it's also just kind of fun to have someone else's input. I can get really in my own way, like I said, and in my own head. So sometimes it's nice just having a different perspective, or someone be like, okay, well, what about the little switch in this? Like, just to kind of bounce ideas off of, and it can be really collaborative. And I personally love that.
Mhm.
I love that I also get to say that I'm also always very much a part of writing my own music, and a lot of the concepts are my own. Sometimes it's collaborative on the concept, sometimes they come in with a concept that's really cool and we both contribute, but I'm always very much involved in my music, even production wise. Like I'll go back and forth with like very specific production notes, or sometimes I'll sit in the studio if I'm able to be there, because I did a lot of sessions over Zoom. But if it's in person, like I'll sit there and be like, take that out. Okay, what if you like made, like I'll be very particular about the way things are, and I personally love being able to do that. But this album came at a time where I hadn't really written or recorded much of anything in almost a year. In
Wow.
a year. And I went to LA because most of the people that I was working with were out there. And I got in a session with the producer that I worked with for most of this album. Like 10 out of the 12 songs are with this producer.
Mm-hmm.
And the 2 other songs are with the same other producer.
Okay. So there's 2
like,
producers, but one person did 90%.
There's only like 2 sets of producers on this whole album.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I met with him. We hit it off great. Had a really great like working rapport, and he was able to very much understand before I really did the direction I wanted to go. But it started, the very first song off this album that I did was Shut Up and Look Pretty. It was a Zoom session, and that's the one I wrote with Rob Thomas.
Oh, Rob Thomas, Matchbox 20 Rob Thomas?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So I actually kind of technically owe it to him, because that session, it was with him and this producer and writer duo called The Gifted, who are great. It was interesting too. I did not know how that song was going to turn out, because we were doing it over Zoom and we were doing it to piano. So there was absolutely no reference of production. I had absolutely no idea what the vibe of the song would sound like production wise that day. It could have gone anywhere. When we were
it was just over piano. Yeah, it was more like an acapella over piano.
It sounded jazzy almost.
Okay.
So they gave me a click track. I actually got to be credited as an engineer technically on that song, because I recorded my own vocals. It was like vocals I did.
Like at your house? Did you record them at your? Wow, that's cool.
So we wrote it that day. It was super fun. It sounded jazzy. So I was like, I have no idea what the song's going to come back like. And they came back with the production, and I was like, I was not expecting it to go there, but the song is like, I love this. And that was the first of its genre. That was the song that really like, I was like, this sound is really cool. Like, what is this? And like, I knew I liked dark pop, and that's probably where I wanted to go. I just don't think I knew how to get there. And that was kind of the catalyst. Cataclysm, is that the right word?
Cataclysm. Yeah. Cataclysm. Yeah.
And I went to LA, kind of showed that song, and the producer that I worked with, his name is Dan Book, I think was kind of able, from my vibe and that vibe, to get to a really good place. The first song that we did together didn't end up working out. Every song after that did.
Wow.
So I wrote and finished writing that whole entire album in 3 months.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That is really incredible.
I think we did like 13 sessions or maybe 12, and like 10 of those are on the album.
Whoa. Wow. Okay. So what you said, the one producer did about 90% of it, and then you worked with another person on 2 of the songs. Are both of those songs on chapter 2, or was one of them on the first part and one on the second?
Shut Up and Look Pretty is on chapter 1.
Okay, so that was the first one that you worked with that one producer. Okay, cool.
And the second one is actually my next single.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so tell me about this next single.
So it's called Sad Ghost.
Okay.
I love. It's definitely the most personal one. So the reason that this album is called It's Not That Deep is kind of like a little on the nose. I think the reason I was stumped for so long on what to write is because Idiot Girl was kind of very, 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 very personal. It was everything that I think I ever wanted to say, like about my childhood, about growing up, about the way I felt. And then I guess the writing caught up with me in real time, and like COVID was happening, and I was also not in the best place. And I feel like I just didn't know what to write about. Everything I would have wrote about would have been like depressing, and I didn't necessarily want to write about a bunch of depressing stuff, not because that's wrong, but it didn't feel like me. I didn't feel like I needed to write about that. And so I was so stumped because I was like, I don't know what to write about. I feel like I don't have anything personal. I don't have any breakups or like, drama or this to like drop,
Right.
like anything like interesting, I guess I thought.
Not a lot of life was lived over
Yeah,
the course of quarantine, right?
and so eventually with that Shut Up and Look Pretty song, I wrote it about something not stupid, but like so like frivolous, like it was I was trying to get back out there like dating wise
Okay.
after the pandemic, and I downloaded a dating app and I matched with this guy who I thought was so attractive, but he was so every time he opened his mouth, he just ruined it. He kind of sucked. And I told them that, like Rob, that. And that's what Shut Up and Look Pretty is about. Like, I just wish he'd shut up and look pretty. Like, it was so on the nose, too. And it was so fun to write about something like that because I hadn't really done that. Everything I'd wrote about was so personal.
Uh-huh.
And it was almost like storytelling. It was still personal to me. It still happened, but it wasn't something that really like affected me. Whereas it
Right.
was something that was true to me. I felt that way. It was real, but it didn't go that deep. And that's
Right.
kind of what a lot of these songs ended up being. They're very much true to me. They are who I am, but they're not so deeply rooted in like personal issues or something that's so deeply personal to me. That I got to kind of tap into a bit more of like a storytelling side. And I grew up, like, I love fantasy. I love like mythical creatures and Halloween. And my favorite pastime is like watching TV. Like, I love stories. I love living in stories. I get very personally attached to stories, like as if I'm living them. If something ends, like I'll feel like there's something missing for maybe like a day because like I didn't want to be pulled away from that world yet. Like, I get very into stories and TV and books and movies and all that jazz. So it was kind of fun because I don't think I realized that I could incorporate that side of me into music. I thought music always had to be like, I think I had a warped perception of what personal meant. And so I started kind of doing the storytelling thing for this whole album. And I think most of them are like some of my favorite things I've ever written.
That's
Um,
really cool. Yeah.
But Sad Ghost is probably the most personal. That one hits the most home in terms of how I felt. I'm also kind of gearing towards like I wanted to release it in October for a specific reason. It's a little more of like Halloween kind of. Um, and it's basically about kind of reflecting on things that don't feel like you anymore, but maybe being a little vacant from it. So it was at a time where like maybe I kind of felt like a little numb. Like kind of when you feel so overwhelmed that you're numb and these things that you talk about don't even really feel like it's like there's like a stair missing in the staircase. You kind of don't really feel it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And this song is almost told as if I'm speaking about someone that isn't me. But it very much is. And it's kind of a reflection of like coming to terms with something maybe not being the way it is anymore, if that makes sense. Like
Sure.
reflecting on the way that you feel and that you feel about yourself, but like things don't really feel the same anymore. Like something's changed in you.
Like, yeah, you're growing or like growth or something or
Growth, yes, but well, the good thing about all of these songs is they're very much up to interpretation as well. I can tell you what it was for me, but part of the fun of it being not that deep is that it can be personal to people in
the listener. Sure. Sure. Okay.
So Sad Ghost is kind of like a reflection of feeling like numb and vacant and feeling like you're changing at a different pace than things are. Like I guess I'm trying to figure out a way to talk about it without completely spoiling it because like I'd have to get into the lyrics I wrote. But I guess it's kind of like making peace with something and moving on from it. It kind of feels a little nostalgic.
Mm-hmm.
A little like self-deprecating, but that's kind of just how I am as a person, like a little cynical, a little self-deprecating, but it's kind of saying like it feels almost like a goodbye.
Okay. That makes sense.
I don't know how else to explain that.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to hear it. That's exciting.
Spoiling it.
Right. Yeah. I don't want to make you spoil it. I'm just curious. Yeah.
The softest one too. Like it's a lot more of a ballad than I've ever done, but it's got some kick to it, of course.
Very, very cool. I mean, obviously Halloween's a big thing. It sounds like as far as like a theme within your music. And what, like, okay, if Halloween's coming up, is that something that you like know? Because I'm terrible at like costumes. I'm just curious. Like, I know this has nothing to do with music, but like, is that something that you're like, okay, I know exactly what I'm gonna do on Halloween at like months in advance, or is it something kind of, or is that just like the feel of Halloween that you like?
Months in advance, both. So I literally have like a
I see like a
Halloween
Jack the
corner.
Pumpkin King thing
So
back
I
there.
have like a Halloween corner over there
Okay,
as like that I like decked out. My other corner is like an anime corner. Like I have like figurines and stuff like that over there.
love it.
But this is my Halloween corner. So like you can't really see it, but I have like an eyeball thing. I wonder if I can show you if you want to see it.
I would want to see it.
Can turn it on. So it's like this. It's got like there's like Jack Skellington
Oh,
here. I've
an
got
AFI thing. Is that, no, it says Ari. I thought it said AFI.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
it's like a comic of me with my cat.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and then I've got like these like flowers that I made look dead, and then like a little eyeball candle thingy back here. It's like a candle holder that turns on and like lights up.
That's awesome.
The whole living room is like already decorated. But in terms of like Halloween costumes, I definitely have a bunch on deck. I always at least once, because usually there's like multiple
Parties and stuff.
parties. Vampire every year.
Okay.
Have to dress
Go
up.
to.
Have to dress up as a vampire. I like dressing up as mythological creatures, like
Okay.
like actual spooky things usually.
Mhm.
Witch and vampire are two I revisit almost every year. I really want to try cosplay though this year.
Okay.
Really crazy cosplay, like for an anime character.
Any specific one you already, or do you have a few in mind?
I do have a few in mind. The only
Okay.
thing is if I was going to do it, I'd want to do it properly. And I'd want to get like a proper wig, the proper costume. Like I wouldn't want to chintz out on it. Like I'd want it
Okay. You'd have to go fully deck out.
full on. So I'd want to make sure if I did it that I'd do it right.
Okay. Yeah, so that could be an investment. You have to make sure, like, to make sure every bit works out perfectly. I love that. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, because I always suck at Halloween. I'm just like,
Yeah.
last minute. I'm like, I don't know. And yeah,
There's so
so
many like last minute costumes you can put together. I definitely love like thinking about it, putting the
sure.
feelers out, even my nails, like the way they look, kind of thing. It's got to match.
Sure. I love it. Well, Aria, thank you so much for taking so much time to hang out with me. I know I've taken so much time away from you, but
Oh
I
yeah, no, sorry. I didn't even realize I've been talking your ear off. Hopefully I
no,
didn't.
no, 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 not, it's not on me. I'm just making sure that you're cool with with the time. I've got all day and I love talking to you. So yeah, this has been awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I've got a lot of exciting stuff. There's a Midas music video that comes out very soon, very, very soon.
Oh, awesome.
May be out by the time that this is out. And then Sad Ghost is also going to have a music video, so you can be ready for that.
Can't
And
wait.
yeah, chapter 2 on the horizon. So a lot of exciting stuff. It's go, 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 but in the best way.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate your time. I have one more quick question before I let you go. I
Mhm.
want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
It is going to be ridiculously hard. Anyone that tells you anything other than that is probably lying to you, but it's necessary. There's a lot of hard work you're going to have to put in. I personally have found myself that it is very easy to feel discouraged because you're going to have a lot of people telling you what you should sound like, what you should look like, what you are, because you are the artist. Try as best as you can, because some people like myself didn't even know who I was, let alone who I was as an artist. And it can be tough trying to find that in the midst of all the voices telling you what they think. Try your best to ground yourself. Make sure you're surrounded by people that ground you. Make sure that you are surrounded by people that believe in you and your project, not just that want to profit off you. And it can be hard to find, and you might have to have some give and take with who those people are. But I promise you, if you love it and it's what you want to do, put in the hard work, and it will be hard, but you will get there eventually, especially if you have the people that believe in you. That has been my championing thing about my whole entire project, is that I was lucky enough to find people that believe in me. And I promise you, there are people out there like that for you.